This is the I Heart My Life show. Welcome to the I Heart My Life show, Victoria. I'm so excited to have you here and learn more about your work, introduce you to our audience for those who aren't familiar yet, and talk all about bending reality and creating a life that is better than you could ever imagine for yourself, for your family, and for generations to come. So welcome.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to take us back and just share a little bit more about the story behind the success and how you actually came to do this work and share this knowledge with the world and all of your incredible clients.
So my career started in venture capital. So I used to be an investor, and I was doing that since I was 23 years old. And that's pretty young, to be a venture capitalist. And I had some early success. I was a Forbes 30 under 30 investor, but I found that the blocks and challenges that were really stopping my founders were less about their business model and things that we kind of talked about on the board. And it was more about limiting beliefs and imposter syndrome and shame and guilt and regret and fear of the unknown and doubt and all the things that I think all of us can relate to. And so ultimately I felt like the biggest needle mover was not to give them advice on their pitch deck and their business model, but to actually go deeper into their subconscious, rewiring and really transforming all of those limiting beliefs so that they can be really expansive ones that feel limitless, that start to make them feel confident and courageous and bold and powerful. And so that's how I got into the work that I'm doing now.
And how did you learn all about that? Did you have your own personal experience with personal development and everything you just described?
Yes. So I hired my first coach over 10 years ago, and I was so into coaching that sometimes I would have 2 or 3 coaches at the same time. I've hired over 25 coaches, and I don't just mean attended a workshop. I mean engaged one-on-one with different coaches for the last 10 years and across the board in health, money, sex, business, relationships, kind of you name it, any topic under the sun, I have hired a coach and expert in that. And I started to see this meta framework emerging of what everybody was sort of teaching in different ways. And then that's what formed my book, Bending Reality, was me really seeing the patterns and seeing behind personal development and spirituality and even real magic, there's actually a theme and a meta framework that emerges that anyone can apply to their life.
So great. And what I often find with people who are in the personal development space is that you have something that was kind of the catalyst to getting you into that work and getting you to hire all the coaches. So was there something you were struggling with or something you were curious about, something you had to work through that was the start of you diving into that world?
It's true that my clients find me because they have a problem they need to solve. But I would say that even though I had a lot of problems I needed to solve, I fell into it. I stumbled into it because I was asking my friends for a speaking coach. I was like, does anybody have a presentation coach, someone who can make me have more gravitas and confidence speaking, during meetings and in front of a room of often in venture capital, it was men who were in their 40s and had more life and work experience than I did. So I was like, does anybody have an ex-consulting kind of PowerPoint master speaking coach? And in the process of asking for that, I had one friend who's also an investor who responded, I don't have a speaking coach, but I have a life coach. And I was like, oh, what's that? And then she's like, well, she kind of helps me with everything. And when I had my first call with her, I asked her, would doing work with you make me a better speaker? And she was like, yes, indirectly, because we'll work on your confidence and your presence and your connection to yourself. And so, yes, a byproduct will be better speaking skills. So I was like, okay, great, I'm bought in. So that's kind of how I stumbled into it. And I'm so glad that I found it, because I probably wouldn't have gone looking for it when I was 26 years old, but I'm so glad that I stumbled into it through a redirect.
And that's so great. And I love that because it totally illustrates what we talk about on the show often, which is how your heart can really guide you into your dream life and what you're meant to do. And you just followed that instinct and that desire to be a better speaker. And that led you to this whole other world and obviously having the impact that you have today.
Yes, it's true. You get many opportunities to be redirected to what you're meant to do.
Love it. So can you talk a little bit about what bending reality actually means and a bit more about the work that you do with your clients?
Yeah, so I believe that we are always bending our reality. It's just if we're doing it unconsciously or subconsciously, we often are bending the odds out of our favor, meaning we're focused on what we don't want to happen, our fears, disappointment, and then that makes us play small and make us feel who am I? Maybe I'm not worthy of this goal or I'm not good enough for whatever reason. So oftentimes that leads to actions that look like not putting ourselves out there, not being bold, not being courageous, like I said, playing small. And so in many ways, until we're consciously bending our reality, we're actually bending the odds out of our favor. And then once we consciously realize, like, oh, really, I can actually navigate and intentionally choose the thoughts that I'm having, the feelings that I'm having, and also the actions that I'm taking so that I can start bending my reality to what I want, right? So it's my belief that so many of us, because of our own parental programming and childhood, we have beliefs around you have to work hard and struggle, right? There's this feeling of like we need to self-sacrifice, and the harder we work and suffer, then there might be a payoff on some future date. And so all of this programming is an illusion, and it keeps us pretty stuck and miserable for a huge portion of our life, if not forever. So bending reality is really going through all of the typical ways that you might unknowingly be bending your reality out of your favor, and then teaching you consciously how to start feeling more expansive in your thoughts, feelings, and actions. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And the tagline is how to make the impossible probable, because even though what I'm saying is very simple, the results are very outlier, tangible results. Like my clients have become multi-billionaires working with me. I've had clients who are on the Olympic track start to actually place into national teams and win essentially those championships. And then I've also had, clients just create new patent innovations and create better ways of science technology that is even creating a more effective COVID vaccine right now. So it really can be applied across the board. I've even had clients apply it to their health and their body. Like I've dropped over 20 pounds in 2 months just bending my reality. And it's not from food or exercise. And that's the really cool thing about this, is that so much of it is a huge energetic alignment and needle mover in our thoughts, feelings, and actions that we don't realize because we're often chasing a tactic or a strategy. Kind of like me, I was looking for a speaking coach. I was like tactically, like, how do I get better at speaking? And then in that process, I went on this whole journey of healing and self-discovery and learning how to bend my reality. And now it's like, I don't need a tactic or strategy. I actually can just create epic outcomes in my life and my clients' lives through bending reality.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so exciting just hearing you talk about this. And I know for me, I just have a million questions. So let's start at the beginning. So if somebody wanted to start bending their reality, what would that starting point be?
Yeah, so the first code I teach in the book is to ask yourself if you feel contracted or expansive right now. And so it's really basic. If I were to ask you actually to tell me, Emily, like in the last 7 days, recall an event that was unpleasant. So maybe it was an email or a conversation, but something that didn't quite go the way you wanted it to. Could you recall something? You don't have to name it detailed, but can you remember something that didn't go well?
Oh, yeah. So we're in the midst of a big move. So I'm currently living at my parents' house until our house is ready. And so that whole process, it's, challenging to not be in your own space.
Yes.
And to just feel like you're in the in-between.
Yes. Okay. So when you feel into this, like, oh, I don't quite have my home and I'm at parents' house and I'm moving and there's all this chaos, like, what do you notice, like, in your body happens to you? Like, do you notice tightness? Do you notice, like, anything happen or change in your breathing?
Yeah, tightness, shortness of breath, some anxiety, just like a lot of restriction in my stomach area.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So you just name this contracted state, okay? So in this state of contraction, what are some of the thoughts that you're having in this state?
Frustration, overwhelm,
Yeah.
this is taking too long, feeling weird being in your parents' house and back in your hometown.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so amazing. So you just named like, this is taking too long. That's like a contractive thought. Create anything that creates like a limit in your body, like you can feel the restriction in your body, is creating a limit on your reality. So you just named it like it's bringing up frustration, anxiety, stress, right? So that's a state that I find so many of my clients live and breathe without even realizing that's their day-to-day, especially as entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurship is, so much uncertainty, and oftentimes uncertainty can bring that up for us, right? Like the unknown can be a little fearful for us, and so we can feel contracted in that place. And so, okay, now let that go, and I want you now to think of something pleasant in the last 7 days that was like, something that went the way you wanted it to, or even better.
Every experience with my daughter. So I would say, just moments with her and seeing her thrive. Yesterday, I took her to a music class with her cousins, and that's the whole reason why we moved here, so she could be around family and grow up with that support system.
That's so amazing. Okay, so I want you to feel into that moment where you took her to music class. Maybe there was a moment where you saw her performing or like laughing or smiling and just enjoying herself. And what do you notice happens in your like body when you feel into that?
I notice a lot of emotion coming up, like
Yeah.
in a positive way. So
Like
feeling
joy,
emotional about
like
it.
move to tears, I can
Um,
see.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
moved to tears and just feeling like a sense of relief
Yeah.
that we made the right decision. And, that was confirmation of it. And just
Yeah.
seeing the joy in her makes me feel joy and
Yeah.
see, that we're bringing happiness into her life.
Yeah. And what do you notice with like your chest area, your heart center?
Yeah, it feels a lot less restricted. And
Yeah.
I feel like almost a sense of relief
Yeah.
coming over my body.
Amazing. Okay, so like very open, right, in that chest
Mhm.
area. Yeah. So what you just described is the expansive state, which is the opposite of contraction. And in this state, as you noted, it's like you feel like a sense of like, I'm in the right place. I trust, there's a sense of like surrendering to the moment, and also such immense joy and gratitude that it's moving you to tears, right? That is such a high expansive state. And that is what I help my clients start to make their default state of reality. Because as you imagine, if you live day to day from here, what kind of thoughts do you have when you feel joyful and happy? Like what were some of the thoughts you had in this moment?
Yeah, we made the right decision. Just gratitude. I can see that she's thriving. Things are going in the right
Yeah.
direction. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So you just named it, like in this expansive state, you felt you had these positive, expansive thoughts of like, I trust, we're in the right place, everything's working out, I don't have to worry about anything. I can kind of exhale with this relief of like, I don't have to question if this was the right decision, right? And you feel that joy and that gratitude. And what an amazing, alive feeling. I can feel how alive you feel remembering that moment. And as you can imagine, like, what would it be possible if you were living and running your business from this state?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely transformational.
Yeah.
And I remember I teach something similar. I don't call it the same thing, but I remember when I moved randomly to London, England, and I was in a quarter life crisis, I realized at one point that I had been focusing on everything that was going wrong
Yes.
instead of all the positives and all of the good things that were happening. And
Yeah.
when I started to shift that, then opportunities opened up and my mindset changed, and I was able to actually see the things coming into my life and doors opening and
Yes.
get more clarity. And
Exactly.
it's so transformational.
Yeah. So when you make this expansive state your default state, all of a sudden you feel synchronicities. I'm in the right place at the right time. You start to feel like this high on life of like just gratitude, and I'm so grateful you're moved to tears, which is the most beautiful experience of life. And then also probably like better inspiration and ideas come through, right? Where you're just like, wow, I feel like I'm in my flow state. And so this is the first thing I teach, is just to ask yourself, like, in this moment, do I feel contracted or expansive? Because to my belief is that all books that teach you, here are the best practices. You should have a gratitude practice. You should connect to your mission. You should connect to your purpose. Or here's what someone who is a conscious leader would do, XYZ. All of those books are written assuming that these are the natural extension of being expansive. If you're in an expansive state, naturally, these are the thoughts, feelings, and actions that you're taking. And so what I teach my clients is, before we get ahead of ourselves and start taking action and strategy and to-dos, it's like, let's just get into the right state, right? Let's figure out, how do we cultivate the state of expansion, trusting that everything else flows aligned. Our thoughts, feelings, and actions are all exactly what they're in our highest and best when we're in this expansive state.
So beautiful. And how do you teach people how to remain in that expansive state, or is that important? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's sort of two ways that we tackle this question. One is we go deep into rewiring maybe old wounds or memories or events that create contraction, right? So sometimes I notice that, like, if a client had something happen that was just like really disappointing or really scary, then their life unconsciously becomes about like, I need to avoid people and situations that feel in rhyme with this thing I'm trying to avoid happening to me, right? So some of that work is actually going in and releasing and resolving so that you don't feel contracted anymore. So you actually feel like peace and freedom, like the charge is removed, so the trigger is removed. So part of the work is going in to remove contractions so that your intensity of the charge is lessened, the duration of how long you're in that triggered state collapses and is no longer like more than a couple seconds. And then the frequency of being triggered also decreases. So a lot of that people just call healing, right? So we go into healing some of the things that create contraction for someone. And then on the flip side of that, we also go into things that raise the upper limits of how expansive someone can feel. So sometimes we have unknowingly like a glass ceiling of like, oh, this is how much I'm allowed to receive. This is how much pleasure I'm used to letting in. This is how much vacation time I'm allowed to have off. This is how much money I think is comfortable receiving. This is how much love and affection and attention I can get before I deflect compliments. So we go into actually resolving like, okay, where is your set point, kind of like the temperature thermostat set at for how much expansion you let into your life? How do we raise the upper limit on that? And one of the most basic things that everyone can benefit from is really increasing the activities that bring us joy. So the things that make us feel expansive, like taking your daughter to her classes and actually attending those and not feeling like, oh, I'm too busy to go watch her. It's like, no, that clearly brings you so much joy. So make time for those things that feel expansive for you. That's something that I feel like we don't give ourselves permission enough, especially as women. We kind of come last. We're like, let me take care of everybody else and then fill my cup. But really, we're flipping that on its head. And it's like, let's actually get you into an expansive place, trusting that everyone else benefits when your cup is full and overflowing. And so let's really optimize and prioritize those activities that feel expansive for you. And then similarly, one thing I often tell my clients is like, always be celebrating, like ABC, always be celebrating, because that's like such an amazing way to get yourself into a vortex of expansion. Again, like as high achievers, we tend to like discount our success and sort of go like, oh, that's no big deal, or like, whatever, I'll celebrate later, or like, oh, my birthday's not a big deal, but we're missing opportunities because to your point, it's like we're focusing on the problems. And then when something amazing happens, we're kind of like, oh, wait, I have to get to my next to-do list item. So it's like, no, let's actually spend more time celebrating what is working, small, medium, large. My husband and I just celebrated our anniversary yesterday, and we're doing like everything, we're like, he got flowers. We went out to like the nicest dinner that I didn't even know a restaurant like that existed in our town, like all of these little things. And then we're sharing our gratitudes of each other and going back and forth saying like acknowledgements that we appreciate about each other. And it's like, how do you cultivate this expansive state? Like do celebrate, express gratitude, like do it with your partner, whatever it looks like for you with your family. So spend more time in expansion and spend more time celebrating.
I love that. And I love how you're giving us like tangible examples and things that we can do every single day. Because it's not just, I'm going to be expansive on my trip to Italy.
Yeah.
It's the everyday little things that are going to create the change in your life.
Totally.
And create that shift.
Exactly. I love that you said that, because like, if you do this, if you do what I'm saying and like make expansion a priority, you can make every day feel like a holiday.
So amazing. And that's what everyone wants.
Yeah.
And I love the other piece around permission. And I think it starts with like getting clear on what actually brings you joy. Because I don't know about you, but I find that so many people don't even take that first step and they don't even know what makes them happy.
Yeah.
They think it's taking that trip or it's buying the thing, but they haven't stopped to evaluate like what is actually creating that joy and true happiness.
Yes, you're so right. And something that I recently learned, because I went to my HBS 10-year reunion and they had like lectures by professors, and there was this one professor named Arthur Brooks. He was talking about how happiness is made up of basically enjoyment, meaning, and he talks about how happiness is 50% genetic. So really based on like how your parents experience, like if they tend to be gloomy or they tend to be happy, but then also 25% based on your circumstances, which is like going on vacation or whatever, and then 25% based on the habits that you're forming. And so a lot of what I'm talking about with you today is like, obviously we can't control the 50% is genetic, but we can control the habits. What are the habits that are spending time giving ourselves permission to do the things that light us up, so we create more circumstances of joy in our life?
That's so interesting. Okay, I'm going to have to do more research on that, because what I realized years ago was that I didn't actually know how to be happy. And I think all of us think it's going to be a natural state. And maybe for some people, they are more predisposed to happiness than others, like you just described. But for me, I've recognized that happiness has to be a deliberate choice.
Yes.
And like you said, starting to put in some of those habits and ways of doing life that will transform your more natural state.
Exactly. And I believe that happiness, even though we think it's associated with some external circumstance of like when I went on vacation, or I got that pay raise, or I got the promotion, or I got married, or I had kids, really it's a life force energy that comes from within. that gets ignited, maybe because you love being with your daughter, so you felt that life force come alive when you spend time with her. But what we want to do is not get distracted thinking it's about something outside of us, but really see it as like, what do I need to ignite to get that life force energy running through me? That flow, so I'm feeling like, oh, I'm like high on life, I'm energized, I feel alive, because I'm, again, giving myself permission to actually do what lights me up.
How do you ignite that personally on a daily basis?
Yeah, so for me, I'm very aware, as you're saying, of everything from the home that we've cultivated. Like, I chose our home and the design because it feels like a spa. I feel happiest when I'm sitting in the spa waiting room and then I'm like, wait, why doesn't my house feel like a spa? Why do I have to go out here to feel like I'm in this state, right? So I actually chose a home and designed a home to feel like every day I'm at a spa, like spa day all day, And then second of all, I would say that my partner and I cultivate this feeling of, not like routine for the sake of routine, but more like, oh, what would feel really exciting right now? We ask, like, what would feel most expansive for you right now? Do you want Italian food or do you want Thai food? And we actually just feel into that. And we're like, oh, this lights me up more, Yesterday we went, out to a nice dinner and we decided to like take turns sharing like things we appreciate about each other because it feels so good. I feel like the greatest gratitude we can receive is the gratitude of receiving someone else's gratitude. So like when someone thanks you for the work that you're doing in the world, Emily, don't you feel so grateful to receive that person's gratitude? It's like the happiest gratitude to receive. So yeah, I feel like because of the work that I do, I'm so aware of like, these are the things that have the highest frequency of expansion. And so we can cultivate them like gratitude or celebration, or in my closet, like I wore a color that I really love, which is like turquoise. And it's just like, everything gets to be an opportunity to be like, ooh, what would light me up? What would make me happy? So I have these orchids behind me. So obviously like on some level, we're like, yeah, it's just about curating your life experience, designing your life in a way that pleases you. And it's like, yeah, that is actually simply what it looks like. It's just to be really intentional to create every moment in your life as an intentional moment of expansion.
This is so important because I think people get confused with this process and they think it's way more complicated than it is. And one of my greatest joys a few weeks ago was I had a client email me saying after one of our sessions, she started wearing red lipstick again.
Yay.
And I was like, that's amazing, right?
Yes.
Like such a small thing, but that means so much when you consider, everything that she had to move through to get to that place and feel worthy of it, feel like she can put herself out there in a more bold way. And she started buying herself the flowers she actually wants, not the cheapest ones.
Yes.
And it's just those little things that really stack up to such a big transformation and create so many beautiful habits. And like you said, that expansion.
Yeah, it all compounds, like every little thing. It's kind of like how money in a bank account with savings compounds, with interest. It's like the same thing. It's every moment of expansion gets to compound on each other.
And I saw your house on Instagram. It is stunning.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I know you were saying, it was bringing up a lot of emotion for you, and it's obviously something you deliberately created. And I think so many people don't give themselves permission to even explore that and see how it could be possible. So I just love that reminder as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And even that story, I know we don't have to get into it right now, but like we met the sellers for dinner and we like kind of fell in love with each other. So like everything in the process was just designed to be expansive,
Wow. Yeah, no, talk about that because my listeners absolutely love these types of stories. So tell us how that came to be.
Yeah, so I first walked into this house in February. And so call it like mid-February, I saw the house and it was about like $1 million out of our budget. Like it was literally like, this is great, but it's too expensive for what we're considering. But like it's a dream house. So I walked through it and like I couldn't figure out why, even though I felt kind of out of reach, I was seeing all these visuals and visions of like, oh, I'm going to host our Thanksgiving dinner with my family here. And we're going to have these kinds of retreats where, I'm going to host these incredible spa-like retreats where it's both spiritual, but it's fun. And it's not like we just do meditation or yoga all day. We do kind of a little bit of all the things that make us feel expansive. So I started to see visions of the future that didn't exist before I walked through the house. Like I'm hosting my first retreat June 27th to 30th. And before February, I didn't know I would be hosting retreats this year. So that's like one thing to listen to is like, oh, something was stirring in me. I started to see visions that I didn't have before this house. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I feel like the house is almost speaking to me. And then the agent told me a story about how the seller, she's very young. She's only 30 years old, but 3 years ago, she actually found out she had cancer, and so she went on her own healing journey for breast cancer. And one of her epiphanies during that journey was that all the time that she spent in nature alleviated her symptoms and made her feel the best in her journey of healing, was like when she was in nature. So then with that learning, she's now in remission, and she's like, she believes she's healed, but obviously the Western doctors just call it remission. She learned all that and then decided to design this house with that in mind. So there's so much natural stone and wood. It's called stonewood, the way they name the property. But she really took those healing properties and elements and like wove it into her design of the house, right? So already I'm like, oh my God, I love this woman. She sounds amazing. And I thought she would appreciate the work that I do. And so I asked to meet them. And so it was me and my husband, her and her husband. He's the construction builder, she's the designer. And we had this amazing dinner where we didn't even talk about the house. We didn't talk about business at all. We just like got to know each other's stories. And that's how I learned about her cancer journey. That's how she learned about what I do. And we just had this feeling of like, I like her so much. Like we're still in touch. We're still texting. She's sending me like recs for my website design right now. Like we're kind of just doing life together at this point. But similarly, she heard my vision for the house and the retreats, and she knows the work that I do, and she wanted me to have it. She was sort of like, you guys are like the ideal buyers of this home, you know? And so fast forward a few weeks after we like get our bank loans in order, we ended up putting in an offer that honestly, I didn't think they were going to accept because it was so much lower than what they were asking for. But again, every moment was so expansive in our interactions with them that their agent basically said to them, look, like you've already generated 6 new projects out of this house because so many people who walked through it fell in love with it and then hired them to build their house. So the agent sort of convinced them of like, you don't really need to make as much of a profit as you thought you were going to on this house because it's already spurred so much business for you. And at the same time, the reason why I think I bet my reality is because you saw the house. It's the dreamiest house ever. And yet they didn't have a second competing offer for it. There was no other bid on it, you know? And so that's where I knew like I bet my reality, because I can all day, you know, create love between me and the seller, but like if they had a better offer, they probably would have gone with the better offer. And so I really think that I somehow created a vortex. I bet my reality. I even blocked out other people somehow in some weird way from even putting in another bid. So they were like, look, we love you guys. There's not like another offer on the table. And they gave us such a good price on it that they actually requested with the MLS, which is the buyer platform, that we don't disclose the price. So I can't even tell you what we bought it for, but that's how good the price was, that they didn't want to let anybody else know because they didn't want like their other projects to be impacted by them dropping the price on this. But it's such a magical story, and it completely came from the principles that I teach around betting reality.
Thank you so much for going into that. I have full body goosebumps because it's just such a powerful reminder that we need to continue to put ourselves out there and to put ourselves into the environment that feels expansive, and just trust that whatever is meant for us will be, even if it feels like it's so far out of the scope of what's possible or what we can afford or you know what we could even envision. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's something my husband said last night about like an acknowledgement of mine. He was like, you're always just out there at least trying to hit the bat. You know, it's like, I'm not attached. I don't know what's going to work out. Like I obviously had no idea. I couldn't have guaranteed the outcome because, you know, there's so many reasons why they would have not sold it to us. But like, I just get out there and I just keep swinging my bat, you know? And then what happens is always like better than I could have hoped for because at least I'm showing up.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, so good. So can we talk a little bit about money? And I know you mentioned the word billions, you have billionaire clients, people who are doing massive things financially. So what does it look like to bend your reality when it comes to money?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So I find that similar to that first framework of like contraction versus expansion, a lot of people feel contraction around money. Right? It comes from like the way we saw our parents relate to it. Maybe we saw our parents struggle with it. So then we have this financial insecurity where we're kind of always feeling like maybe the rug could be pulled out from under us and we always have to save up for a rainy day. So some of the like contractive thoughts that I think are very common around money are like, there's not enough, or like, where does it go? Or I don't feel worthy enough to actually ask for what I think I'm worth, you know? So I keep kind of under making money or under earning essentially. Or because money is so uncomfortable for me, I kind of like put my head in the sand like an ostrich and I like pretend it's all fine, but really I'm just sort of unconsciously spending and I have like holes in my bucket and I'm leaking and I don't even pay attention to it because I don't feel like I'm in my power around money. So I don't even want to like look at my bank account or manage or think about what I could be doing better, right? So there's a little bit of like, either avoidance around money, which as you can imagine is not healthy with our relationship to money, or there could even be a sense of like, I am the number in my bank account. So I tie my sense of self-worth to how much I'm making, which is also unhealthy. So what I've seen is that there's all these contractive ways that we can essentially relate to money. And so a lot of my work is going in there and like really identifying what some people call limiting beliefs, for instance. But to me, it's beyond limiting beliefs. It's really like, what does that create in your body? Like, oh, I feel that restriction. I feel that contraction. I feel that charge of like guilt that I just spent that money. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Or like shame of like, ooh, I feel like I'm not making that much money right now. Or I feel like bad because I feel like there's so many people suffering on the planet who don't have enough. So who am I to want more money because maybe that is like someone else's loss, right? So there's this all this feeling, guilt, shame, fear, doubt that we can have around money. And then as you can imagine, the actions that someone might take with those thoughts and feelings, they might be like, you know what, I'm just gonna like not spend and I'm just gonna keep saving and I'm just gonna see my savings account keep growing. And that kind of makes me feel safe. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not enjoying my life because I'm not actually using money with the purpose it was intended for, right? And then similarly, on the flip side of that, if we're kind of more like avoidant and like putting my head in the sand like an ostrich, we might just be like, I don't even know, my credit card bills are like, I'm not even paying attention to how much I'm spending. And then only like at the time that I'm paying it, am I like, ooh, ouch. Oh no, really? That's really high. Like I didn't know that it was such a high month, right? And so there's a little bit of that where we're not being responsible with money. Those are just some of the examples of how we relate to it contractively. But if we, on the flip side of that, start to get into our personal power around money and start to feel expansive around money, some of the thoughts and beliefs that my clients start to have is like, the more fun I have, the more money I make, right? Which is like such a disruption of the old paradigm. But I really feel that to be true. As you can hear me talking, it's like, I'm so happy and I'm so expansive. And I feel like the more I create that, the habits that cultivate and optimize for expansion, the more I'm a magnet, you know, for opportunities. The more I feel like I have great ideas because it's like I'm a clear channel for inspiration to come through because I'm not blocked up with feelings of guilt and shame, but I'm actually in this expansive energy of celebration and gratitude and trust and surrender. So one of the things that I think this allows for is to not get too attached to goals and situations. Like I think, as we mentioned, keep getting at bats, like keep getting up to the plate and swinging your bat, but trusting that it's this or something even better, you know? And so I think that the two opposites that we want to avoid are like, oh, I'm like a paper boat that's just, you know, flimsy, going with the flow, and I have no agency over my life, right? That's like one extreme. But then the other extreme is like the person who's controlling and has a false illusion that they can control and predict life. And so much of their contraction is coming from like trying to control everything and getting upset when it doesn't work out the way they want it to. And same thing when it comes to money. It's like, we don't need to just sort of sit back and lean back and just sort of be like, oh, whatever's meant to be will be, and be that flimsy paper boat. But we also don't want to be like, oh my gosh, I need to make X amount of money by July 1st. And if that doesn't happen, then, you know, I go into like a whole downward spiral of contraction around what it means for my future, what it means about my worthiness, what it means about the future of my business, what it means about sales, right? So I feel like, again, like getting into this expansive thoughts are things like, I'm worthy, you know, that my work, my gifts on the planet are worthy of high compensation because of the impact that I'm creating. So rather than seeing like, oh, time is money, where I'm trading hours for money, it starts to be impact is money, right? So instead of measuring how many hours I spent with this client, it's more like, what is the impact, you know, of becoming a billionaire? You know, what is the impact of healing from a chronic illness? What is the impact of finding the love of your life? What is the impact of creating the body of your dreams, right? So to me, like we start to have these higher level perspectives around how we value our worthiness, our relationship to money, and also the way we set financial goals shifts when we're coming from that expansive place.
So good. And when it came to, say, specifically the billionaires or even the millionaires, was there one shift that you find most people had to make that allowed that expansion into their life?
Yes, I think that across the board, all of my financially successful clients, like Fly by Jing is an example in my book. When she started working with me, she was the only employee of her company. They were making a couple $100,000, and now she's personally gonna make like $100 million. You know, when she sells her company, like that's in like 3 years basically. And the reason this shift happens, where instead of making the goal a dollar amount of like, I want to become a billionaire or like I want to make $100 million, they really see it as like, what is the mission and the impact that I want to create? And how can I really tap into my zone of genius so that I'm really leaning into my own gifts? Because I think we feel most expansive when we're doing the thing that comes naturally to us, that we love to do, that lights us up to do it, that we'd almost do it for free, right? So with my multi-billion dollar client, he's an engineer. So his mind is all about solving problems, and he loves to think about problems, world problems, big problems. That he's an engineer, so he's always tinkering with, like, it's a system, right? And he's kind of like, ooh, what if I did this? What if I did that? And similarly, his mission or his impact on the planet was he wanted to help almost create like an equal playing field by putting money back in people's pockets. So his company was Honey, and he's basically giving free money away by finding automatically the best deals on the internet, so that at checkout you were immediately getting money back, essentially. Instead of trying to go look for discounts and cut out coupon codes, they automatically, with their technology, find the best deal for you. So that's what he was doing for people, and he just really cared about this idea of a basic income, like what would it look like if everyone felt like their basic needs were met? How can we put more money into people's pockets? And so in both of these cases, same thing with Fly by Jing, like she has an amazing Chinese sauce, and she wanted to elevate these ethnic cuisines so that it's not just like Italian and French that we consider elevated, but we start to see like Indian food and Chinese food and these sort of more marginalized groups that are typically considered cheap. She started to elevate them so that you start to have, oh wow, this is what like high quality, amazing ingredients, elegant Chinese cuisine can taste like. So both cases, it's like they had a mission and a vision that was not like, I want to become a billionaire, And I think that so often those of us who don't yet feel abundant are making our goals a money goal. And then by making the goal a money goal, we're agreeing to doing things we don't want to do because we think this is the path to make that amount of money. That's like, I give an X, like, it's like the wrong path. It's like you're going the wrong way if you're trying to make a money goal and then you're doing things, willingly doing things that you think like, I just need to put in the work, I need to struggle, I need to suffer, I need to sacrifice, I need to do the thing I don't want to do because it's the only way I can make money. And it's like, that's a dead end, essentially. So with all of the clients that are very successful, it's them trusting themselves enough to be in their zone of genius, knowing that their natural gifts are worthy of high compensation, and then really focusing on the impact that they're making through the mission and vision they have on the world. And then the byproduct of that is more money than they imagined.
Oh, so amazing. Thank you for describing that and explaining it. So good. So I just have one more question for you. We ask all of our guests here on the I Heart My Life show this final question. What would you say is one way people can create a life that's better than their dreams?
So one thing that I do every single day is, and I know that not everyone has an hour for this, but I spend an hour meditating at the start of my day. But it's not just the typical like TM meditation or like trying to calm the monkey mind and not think about anything. It's actually a meditation where I sit and I energetically feel into the thing that I want to create, right? And that could be a short-term goal or a long-term goal, but it's almost like I treat myself like I'm calibrating to it, kind of like a tuning fork. It's like I start to feel like, well, like for instance, like what does courage feel like in your body? And then you just sort of sit there and you feel like, oh, what would it feel like to really cultivate courage? Or, what does a miracle feel like for you? And I was like, ooh, what does a miracle feel like? And you start to like feel energetically what a miracle feels like in your body. So I take myself through this every single day, and it's the best way to start my day, as you can imagine, and immediately recalibrates your system to a state of expansion. And then I really believe it's the energy from which we create from that dictates that quality and direction of that creation. So for me, that's like having breakfast. It's like, or for some people having coffee. It's like, I don't drink coffee, I don't have any caffeine, but that is my form of like, I need to start my day intentionally in the right energy, in the right expansive state. Yeah, so I highly recommend some sort of morning ritual to get you into a place of expansion.
That leads me to one other question I need to ask. So I noticed so many incredible people on your website, people like Cindy Crawford, you've worked with, you mentioned the founder of Honey. So how did you manifest those relationships and those clients? I don't know if you'd even use the word manifest, but how did you expand your reality to be able to bring people like that in?
I love that you asked that. So it is about expanding your comfort zone so that those crazy visions start to feel like, oh, it's not crazy. Like it feels doable, So that can come with sitting with that idea. So before I met Honey, the idea that I kept saying to myself, kind of like this calibration portal that I'm talking about every morning, is I said, I am a unicorn whisperer, which for those who aren't in tech or startup world, that essentially means a multi-billion-dollar company. So once a company is worth $1 billion, it's considered a unicorn, you know? So I would start saying, like, I'm a unicorn whisperer, you know, supporting conscious leaders to use their power, platform, and influence for good. And it was like kind of a mantra in a way. So every day that I had coaching calls, I would say that 3 times before I got onto a call. And I didn't have any unicorn clients at the time, but I was just saying it over and over to kind of, again, recalibrate my nervous system so it starts to feel like energetically, this feels comfortable. It feels familiar. It feels like it's not some foreign idea that almost makes me feel like, oh, who am I? But I start to feel like, yeah, I am, you know? And so it's energetically, this is what I think when people study manifestation, I think it's what they mean when they say you need to like energetically get onto the wavelength of the thing that you're calling in. So that was one thing that I did. And then I also at some point said I'm a celebrity coach before I had celebrities. I wasn't saying this in my copy on websites, obviously, but I was feeling into it of like, that's totally a possibility, right? And I didn't know what celebrity it would be. I didn't know it would be Cindy Crawford. I just had a feeling of like, yeah, that's totally something that can happen. And so I really recommend to everyone listening is like, start playing with, do you see the way, like I'm playing with it? I'm not like, this has to happen or else I'm worthless. It's like, oh yeah, let me try this on. Let me play with it. Let me energetically entangle with it. Let me calibrate to the frequency of this. And then I would say like, just cultivating that in my own body and embodying that frequency is what made me almost like a beacon or a satellite that was like receiving or magnetizing these things to be true. And Cindy Crawford actually came through my book. She read my book, Bending Reality, and she listened to it on audiobook in one Sunday afternoon. And then she messaged a mutual friend and said like, oh, is she taking on any more one-on-one clients? And when I got the message, a part of me was like, oh my God, why does she want to work with me? Like I'm younger than she is. Like I'm not a big deal like she is. And I almost had a moment of like, do I have anything to help her with? But once I got on the call with her and we talked, I could feel that there was just a lot of like chemistry, you know, like we really like get along and there was a lot of great ideas and flows coming through. So I was like, you know what, I think I can do this. And I would say that every opportunity in our life gets to help us build our confidence and self-trust, you know, because I think something that I feel like I will forever appreciate Cindy for is that until Cindy, there was still a part of me that made me felt like, am I ready for that? You know, like, am I good enough for that? But because the work we did together was so transformative and every session she was like, I love this session so much. And she was so appreciative. It really started to make me feel like the work works, you know, and I don't have to second guess it. And I don't have to wonder if I'm good enough to coach her. And now since we've worked together for years, I feel like she has helped me believe, at least we'll see until someone else wants to work with me, but she's made me believe that like, I am ready for whatever's next. Like there's nothing that's too big, you know? And I think that's like the greatest blessing to get to build your trust and confidence in that way.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So inspiring. So I'm sure everyone's wondering, where can they find you? Where can they follow you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. Okay. So I actually have this amazing thing right now, the first time I'm doing this, which is I have like a free 7-day trial of my work. So if you just go to my website, www.victoriason.me, which I'm sure you'll put in the show notes, you can access sort of my year-long mentorship program where I give you the best trainings. You get to ask me coaching questions, kind of like how you're asking me questions now, Emily. Like we do that every month. And that's only $111 a month. So if you decide to stay after the trial, that's how much it is for the year. And then also I have my audiobook. I have my book, Bending Reality. It's sold wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and I can't name another bookstore right now, but you know, and then, yeah, I mean, I love, you know, I love this work so much. It's like the greatest gift that I get to be in this expansive energy, doing exactly what I love most, making a difference every day. And yeah, so I just highly recommend if anyone feels called to work with me, I have courses at every level. I have the $111 per month. And then I have like more live access to me where you even get to text message me, which I know sounds crazy, but it's like you can actually text me questions throughout a day. And that's my inner circle offer. And that one is more like in the couple $1,000s for the year. And then I have one-on-one coaching as well, which is things like what Cindy does with me. So essentially every level, I have something if you want to work with me.
So amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on, Victoria. I feel expanded just by this conversation. I know everyone listening does as well. Thank you for making this so tangible and doable and just reminding us what's possible when we start to bend our reality.
Yes, amazing. I love your show too. I heart my life. I love my life. So it's my hope that the work we do today gets to ripple out and help more people love their life.
Yeah, it's so obvious. I can tell you're having so much fun with this and you love what you do. So that's super refreshing in itself. So
Thank you,
thank you.
Emily.
One more thing before you go. I've created a dream life guide to support you if you're in a transition or just trying to get clear on what it is that you actually want. You have a feeling that you're meant for more, there's something else available for you. This guide will support you in getting that clarity and understanding any of the mindset blocks that may threaten to hold you back, and then get into action to the results that you are craving. So go to emilywilliams.com/guide to get this free guide today, plus a bonus walkthrough where I go through all of my framework and the steps that I take to support women just like you in creating their dream life. So go to emilywilliams.com/guide.